My name is Ann Rigari. I'm the consultant for the Brain and Tissue Bank. Let me just advance my slide here. We got it. So I'm presenting the information. I'm also the founder of Partners for Krabbe Research, which partially funds the Brain and Tissue Bank. I'm also the parent of two Krabbe children, Nick and Gina, and I also have a non-affected son, Phil. My disclosures are I'm also a co-founder of Krabbe Connect, where I'm the patient engagement manager there, and I'm also the author of two children's books, Just Like Me and Just Like Me Too. So to get into a little bit of background, the Brain and Tissue Bank received IRB approval in 2015 at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And the inspiration for creating this bank was from my daughter, Gina. Nick was born in 1986, was diagnosed with Krabbe disease in 1987, wait a minute, back up. He was diagnosed in December of 1986 and passed away in May of 1987. You know, when we got his diagnosis in December of 86, we were told we would never see another child with Krabbe. I would never see one in my lifetime. I was 29 at the time. I might meet another family that had been affected, had a child or a loved one affected. There'd never be a treatment and there'd never be a cure. And I just thought, how can this be? This isn't how this happens. So Nick was my second born child. Phil was first. And then because we knew it was a genetic disease, we thought, well, maybe we won't have any more children. Well, 13 years later, surprise, I'm pregnant. And there's a 1 in 4 chance that this pregnancy would be affected. Gina was born December 23rd, 1999. Her due date was December 25th, but she chose her own date to come, and we were so excited. We were like very hopeful that she would not be affected, and we tested her at birth, and at 2 weeks of age, she was positive for Krabbe. At this time, my son Philip was a sophomore. He had been a sophomore in high school. He was now a junior, and he had done a research paper on Krabbe disease, and we had found that there had been treatments. The New England Journal of Medicine had published there were treatments at Duke and the University of Minnesota. So we called the doctors at Duke, and at 3.5 weeks of age, Gina received a stem cell cord blood transplant to change the course of her disease. Gina was the third baby at Duke to ever receive a treatment as a newborn for this disease. She was the youngest patient at the time in January of 2000 to ever receive chemotherapy for any disease. Gina was their first girl. They had transplanted 2 other boys that were a little older but were newborns. So there were a lot of new things that we were stepping into. Gina did really, really well. And I was involved with a lot of conferences that were involving the research because I wanted to learn what was going on in all the animal models. I wanted to understand this disease and how it worked. And what we were seeing in the animal models, that there was some theories that maybe in the peripheral nervous system, this disease affects the central and the peripheral nervous system, that there may be some problems with the peripheral. And with Gina, we saw a decline in around 10, 11 years old, that she started losing some function in her hands. She started losing function in other areas. She was starting to have scoliosis because there wasn't support in the muscles. Gina was seen by a neurodevelopmentalist, Dr. Maria Escalar, her entire life, who followed her. And in 2013, I started saying, I kept seeing Gina's decline. She was now needing oxygen at night to sleep. And then what if she passes? What are we going to do with these precious brain and tissues? And at the time, and still today, there is a brain bank at the NIH. But I would never know what her tissues would be used for. I would never know what research would come out of it. I would never know if her tissues were being given away for research that wouldn't make a difference in future children or patients with this disease. So we started talking. Of course, we were already in Maria Escolar's camp, but she started talking to, excuse me, Dr. Julia Koffler, who's the director of the Alzheimer's Bank at the University of Pittsburgh. And in May of 2015, we received IRB approval to start the Brain and Tissue Bank. Unbeknownst to me, Gina passed away. She passed away in June. We didn't anticipate her death that soon, but it came in June of 2015. So hers were the first tissues to go into this bank. And interestingly enough, a month later, Maria Escolar got a call from another family that their child was passing away from progression of the disease, and said, you need to call them and help them navigate how we're going to get these tissues. And I'm like, okay. And that started my work as a consultant for the Brain and Tissue Bank. I have worked with the families to make those coordinations, and I'll go into a little bit more of that on these slides to kind of tell you the process. But this is a sensitive topic. It's a hard topic. But as we get in the slides, you'll see some of the importance of why, this has made a difference. So again, it's under the direction of Dr. Maria Escolar, Dr. Koffler. The program is partially funded by Partners for Krabbe Research and other contracts associated with UPMC, the University of Pittsburgh. We initially started out with Krabbe disease brains and tissues, and we are expanding to receive other leukodystrophies and lysosomal storage diseases and neurodegenerative diseases. So just to give you some background information, the patient donations to date, we have 18 untreated Krabbe patient donations with different stages and ages of the disease. We have one treated, which is Gina. Sorry that this is kind of light. The one treated patient. And then we have two, out of those 18, there were actually 2 donations that were made 10, 15 years prior to starting the bank that were sitting in a biolab in some other portion of the hospital. And when the brain bank started, Dr. Koffler was notified that there were these other 2 brains that were there. So we have these 2, what we call historic cases also. We also have a transplanted Gaucher type 2 case and 2 Sanfilippo cases currently in the Brain and Tissue Bank. So, why donate brain and tissue? And as we know with rare disorders, brain and tissue donations allow researchers a better understanding of the changes that are taking place in the tissues and the brain and in the nervous system. These research projects are carefully evaluated to ensure that they can be used for translational medicine. So we don't let just anyone get tissues from the Brain and Tissue Bank. We actually, when scientists, researchers request tissues, they have to also submit the work that they're going to be doing. And I sit on the review board along with several other people to make sure that these projects are going to be translational into a treatment or something that can help the patients in the future. That's what we call translational medicine. And it's important to look at the human tissues because in the animal models, they're not humans, they're animals. And we've learned so much from the animal models, right? But not enough to really know the mechanisms of the disease and how we can maybe change some outcomes. And these are just some slides of human patient nerves, and I know it's just kind of a research slide so that you can, know that this research is valuable, to move forward and to have breakthroughs. One of the things that after Gina's tissues were initially donated, They go through an evaluation by Dr. Koffler, all the tissues do that come into the Brain and Tissue Bank. And her findings, initial findings, she presented at a CRAB-A meeting, and the researchers said that it propelled the research 5 years forward. They could stop some of the experiments they were doing and move on to advance other research. So that was a huge win for really recognizing and acknowledging how valuable these tissues are. So, you know, we want to keep moving forward and expanding this so that we can keep learning. So some of the publications that have already, in just the 8 years that we've had the Brain and Tissue Bank, we've had 3 published manuscripts. Scientists, including some from Italy, these tissues have been shipped to Italy. We've had 8 patients' samples, 8 patients' tissues shipped to Italy for evaluation. So, you know, our kiddos are, traveling across the continent for research. But that's one. Dr. Feltry, who's at University of Buffalo, and Nadiv Weinstock also published, did some work. They actually presented on it here at the ULF 3 years ago, because their publication came out in 2020, but they had presented on their work, I believe, in 2019. And there's actually another manuscript that was recently published. But this picture, Neuron, which is where Dr. Feltry's publication was in the manuscript it was published on, this was the cover of that particular particular publication that had a number of research papers. But Dr. Feltry's daughter was so inspired by the nerves that she drew them, and this is one of the patient's actual rendition, artistic rendition of CRAB-A patient's nerves. So that was pretty kind of inspiring on other levels as well. A paper came out also last July on the comparison of a treated and untreated case. And it just showed really the vast differences that in the brain, the stem cell transplant or cord blood transplant, there was no disease progression whatsoever in the brain of the treated patient. And but in the peripheral, which they looked at the peripheral nerves, you know, there was disease progression, which we knew. This research has led us to clinical trials for gene therapy, so that we know we need now to fix the peripheral nervous system, which is the enzyme that the kiddos get when they're transplanted, or the patients get. The enzyme is actually held in different cells in the brain than it is in the rest of the nervous system. The cells in the brain don't regenerate, so the enzyme is held there, but in the peripheral nervous system, those cells that hold the enzyme regenerate, so there becomes less and less of the enzyme that is needed for the nerves to function. And that's what we've learned from some of the animal studies, but also from the human study. So this is significant, which has led us, and we have children currently who have had gene therapy trials to receive both the transplant and the gene therapy. And so, you know, we're looking to expand it, and those kids are doing very well on their Forge Biologics has presented that a year out, those kids have normal mobility skills. So that's one big advantage of these publications and the research. So again, I was at World, we wanted to do an abstract on the reasons, the novel approach of how we initiated this brain and tissue bank so that it can be used in other countries of the world. And in fact, I just spoke with someone in Australia who heads up the Child Neurology or Child Dementia Foundation. And it's very hard to get tissues transported, especially across the world sometimes. I mean, we've been trying to get this one case out of Mexico for a long time of a family that donated their brain and tissues, and it's been taking months. So she contacted me to see, excuse me, how to saw my poster at World Lysosomal Storage Diseases and wanted to know how to set up something like this in Australia. So we want to continue to advance the work, and if the tissues can't come to the bank, we want to find ways that we can get them and get this approach into other countries. Excuse me. There's Gina. This is the only picture I have in this presentation. Yeah, if you got an extra one, thank you. But thanks, doll. But so that's so we wanted to expand this type of banking into other parts of the world if we need to. Thanks, Lisa. So, of the families, I'm going to go into more of the process now of what we do. But this is a quote from a family that donated their child's brain and tissues. So, Krabbe is a rare and deadly disease. Watching our son suffer with only comfort measures makes you want to help in any way you can. Our family realized that our son could help save lives by donating his tissues to the NDRD Brain and Tissue Bank. Our hope is that our son's tissues will help researchers find a cure for Krabbe. So just to give you a little bit of background on how this works and when arrangements should be made, you know, it's never too early to start planning. You know, if this is something that is imminent someday, we can get the paperwork just rolling. You're never under a commitment ever to go through with this. But just to have some paperwork in place, and I'm the consultant, so you would be working with me directly, and just we can make all necessary arrangements on how this process works, have some conversations so that when a patient passes away, it's so emotional in that moment. You don't want to be thinking about, I got to sign this paper, I need to do this work. Everything can be done in advance, but then I have gotten calls in the middle of the night where we knew we wanted to do this, and now this is happening, so what can we do to get the process rolling? And so we will be there at any time to help move things forward. So some of the arrangements, you know, there are no costs involved to the families that want to donate. Partners for Krabbe Research pays for any transportation. Tissues are shipped from one hospital facility to UPMC. That is all paid for by partners. So there are no costs to the families to ever donate the brain and tissues. So, you know, all logistics regarding a brain and tissue can be worked out. I know sometimes families may not know a funeral home that they want to use, but we usually do some coordination with the funeral home, depending on what part of the country they're in and where their child's been seen. I may do some advanced work with a local pathologist there that we send them a protocol of what tissues that we need. So we can do all of that work in advance so that they're prepared too, knowing that a case may come in, and then just in a really timely manner, getting everything turned around as quickly as possible so the families can have, you know, the patient's body back in their funeral home or prepared for their funeral arrangements. So some frequently asked questions by families are, will an autopsy affect the funeral arrangements and viewing? So an autopsy and extraction is always is done from the back of the head and different parts. So you could have an open casket, and this is important to a number of families to be able to view. So that can all be arranged with the funeral home and depending on what the family's needs or wants are. And then the actual autopsy results, when the tissues get sent to University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, Dr. Koffler does an examination and makes a report on what she has found, and that information, if the family wants it, is available to them so that they can see those reports. And sometimes it's hard when you're going through a disease. You look at your loved one, you look at them, and you know there's this disease going on, but sometimes you really don't understand really what it's been doing to the body. And a lot of parents, some have not wanted to read the reports, and some have, and it's given them actually closure to understand really the hard process of the disease. And it's kind of given them peace and comfort that they were able to understand more about the disease. So that is optional. And again, the samples are kept at University of Pittsburgh under Dr. Koffler's direction at the Alzheimer's Bank. And nobody has access to those unless there's a lot of paperwork that we have filled out and requests that have to be made and approval before any tissues are shipped out anywhere. And actually, we only ship the exact amount that the researchers are requesting. If they request more and they don't have validity for the work, they don't get it because these tissues are just too precious and limited. So yes, the questions and answers, I think I've gone over the questions and the answers here. And those tissues are stored there, and they're a very safe place. So, you know, your loved one's priceless contribution, you know, it is a generous gift to make this type of donation, and we are really extremely grateful for the families that have been able to do this. This is a very sensitive, hard thing for a lot of families to make this decision, but the ones that have really felt good about the research that's come out of it. We currently, and I didn't mention this on the previous slide, but we currently have 3 other papers in process that'll get published within the next 2 years as well. And one of those papers will come out of Pittsburgh, and it's on all the tissues, all the Krabbe tissues to date. We actually, the last case that was donated, a marker came up that hadn't really been noticed in the other cases, and now that's gone back and been investigated, and it's got various degrees of information. So that paper is being worked on currently. There's another paper actually, Dr. Feltry's group is working on one, and there's another one out of New Jersey that has some of our tissue samples that he's working on, a bigger paper. Everyone received a brochure in their packets, and if you didn't, I have more with me, so it just kind of goes over the contact information, how to get in touch, you know, again, some frequently asked questions, just some general information. You can also go to Krabbes, KRABBES.org, to download this or to find out more information about the Brain and Tissue Bank. You know, here's some contact information. This is the lab here and the lab here. This is Dr. Koffler, where the brain and tissues, some of the tissue samples are held. There's also some other freezers and storage units that have tissues. But, you know, the Partners for Krabbe Research, you can get information from me, from UPMC Children's Hospital, and from Dr. Koffler. And, you know, if researchers are interested in tissues, again, the same people, Dr. Koffler, it's really the main contact. They can also contact me, and I can get them in touch with Dr. Koffler. So there's a lot of ways to make requests for the tissues. And I want to thank the United Leukodystrophy Foundation for having me speak on this and to open up the door for other leukodystrophies to hopefully be included in this research so we can advance research projects. I want to thank Dr. Koffler and Dr. Escolar for the work they do, and I especially wanted to thank the families and their loved ones who have contributed generously with the donation of their loved ones to the Brain and Tissue Bank. Oh no, any questions? Yes?
Are there a lot of brain and tissue banks? And one question is, should we find out where the main researchers for our disease want the brain and tissue sent? For example, my researcher for my disease, Eckhart Gutierrez, wants things to go to Maryland Brain and Tissue Bank, which is not used. So do you try to direct people to the banks of their research, or just is there one it's willy-nilly where the tissues go?
Yeah, great question. So yes, the tissues can go to the Maryland or the NIH or to the NDRD, Brain and Tissue Bank. The difference with those tissues, and there have been other publications on tissue samples used in the leukodystrophies, but they don't discern whether the research will be for translational medicine or if they're studying at a cellular level, which may not translate into a treatment. They may just be studying the disease. Also, families will never be notified that their loved ones' tissues have been used in research. And that's, so you can choose wherever. You could talk to the different researchers to see where they get their tissues from. And maybe they would let you know that we were able to receive tissues. But, everything is de-identified in our bank. But when publications come out, families usually know that they can kind of see in publications information that might say how old these tissues were, what form of the disease they had, or so families kind of have a really good sense. So I think it's just where your comfort level is and where you would want to make those donations. Any other questions? Yes?
I don't know if it's my state that I live in, but in looking into this, I was told that autopsies for brain donation have to be in very special places, and the nearest one is like 100 miles away. So it was not something to easily do, and living in a rural area, they'd have no idea what to do.
Right.
And so trying to plan it ahead has been logistically, I still don't know what's going to happen or what, but I was told that you have to get there as soon as possible to get the tissue if they want to try to make cultures that live and things like that. And I'm just concerned that if the nearest place is 150 miles, is the brain going to be worth what I want it to be?
Great question. That is a really good question. I did not touch on that. So we would like to have the tissue samples or the autopsy. Well, we would like the patient to be received at a morgue where it's frozen within the first 24 hours. And then the autopsy can be done within a few days of that time, okay? But the first 24 hours is the critical time on getting the tissues, the body frozen to preserve those tissues. And your question about logistics, we had a family that lived rurally and maybe even a couple 100 miles away from the facility that could do that kind of extraction. That's one of my jobs, is to figure out who can do it and can they do the protocols of what we want. And the funeral home drove the patient to that facility, waited, and then drove them back to the funeral home. So those are some arrangements that I work with the funeral homes or with transportation companies or whatever's needed so that we can get those tissue samples extracted if those are the wishes of the loved ones or yourself, or however you want those wishes to be. We do our best to fulfill them and make those arrangements so that you don't have to and you don't have to worry about them. And that's some of the advanced planning I was talking about. we had a family that lived 4 hours from the University of Pittsburgh, and the funeral home, that was another case, actually transported them there, waited while the tissue samples were retrieved right in Pittsburgh, and then drove the body back. I also, it's logistics. We can figure out a way, and you're right. If the main hospital is the facility where the pathologist is that can do the extractions, that's where we need to do it, because it is information that's specialized. You can't just have a local pathologist do that work. So it's doable. Do you have any other questions?
Have you had problems like weekends, evenings, to get things done?
So usually kind of in the advanced planning, that's what's important, to kind of have the funeral homes on alert that, we have a patient that has these wishes, or a family that has these wishes. So, maybe their passing is not imminent, and it could be weeks, maybe even months, but they're aware of the situation. We've already made the contact with the pathologist. They're aware of the situation. And so when that time comes, we haven't had a case yet that has gone outside the 24-hour window. So,
can I give a personal example of
Yes.
an untimely death? So my daughter's brain is one that is in the brain and tissue bank. She died on Easter Sunday. So not only a Sunday, but a holiday, early in the morning. And so I immediately texted Dr. Escalar and I said, I don't know what to do. She said, don't worry about it, because we had already decided when our daughter was about probably a year old that that's what we were going to do, because we found out we couldn't donate any other organs. And we wanted to do something. And so she got in touch with Anne early on Easter Sunday morning, and they set everything in place. It happened exactly like what you said. The funeral home transported our daughter to the medical center. The medical center treated her as though she was alive. Like, they contacted us and they said the procedure is starting, which that was weird to me. I'm like, I don't think I really needed to know. But then they called me when it was done, and they told me that she was on her way back to the funeral home, and it was seamless. And so I can testify that it not only is an incredible way to make sure that your child has a legacy that outlives you, because they actually, I think, can't they keep these for 100 years? So these samples can live for 100 years. But they make it seamless in the process. So, yeah, we're very grateful we did it.
Thanks, Lisa. And to answer your question, there have been some facilities that may not do autopsy services on the weekend, but as long as the patient's body is in the morgue, where it's at the hospital, so it's being frozen, then they might cut first thing Monday morning. They'll work on the extraction, and that's okay too. It's just that first 24 hours we need to really get those tissues cold, so frozen, if that makes sense. So
they freeze the body or they freeze the brain?
Well, they freeze the whole body in order to take the tissues, because you got to get nerves out of the part of the spine, and nerves out of maybe some things out of the legs or arms. So yes, the whole body. Okay, I know you had a question over here.
I know you showed the numbers of
Yes.
tissue samples that you have for Krabbe. What about some of the other leukodystrophies? We have vanishing white matters.
Sure, and that's why I'm here. We want to expand that. We don't have those yet, but we're looking for that. And now that we've been able to have several papers published, and you can see the value of the brain and tissue bank, now we can be really asking and letting people know about the value in this brain and tissue bank, so that we can expand to other leukodystrophies. And like, let's say the vanishing white matter was donated. Researchers will usually know where these tissues are being kept. There's a registry where there's tissues, and then they can come to the bank and receive them. Or this is a small community, right? The leukodystrophy community. And this is something we can make maybe aware on the, on the ULF's website even, to say, hey, these are the tissue samples that are available, where researchers may want to see that information and get in touch with the brain bank. Yes.
Maybe just a couple of comments from a science and researcher's perspective, who has been using thank you, who has been using human brain tissue from patients and controls very successfully. So first of all, it's absolutely critical for our research. I can just confirm it. The other thing is, I think donating it to a brain bank rather than individual researchers, which happens once in a while, is very, very important for us. In a disease like a Cardi-Gautier syndrome, where we work on, we have struggled to get tissue from about 6 patients because the Maryland Brain Bank, which we've received from some tissue, we got 3 patients, I think, from there, and they've got a very good register. And all the other tissues, we pretty much went to people who've published on tissue, trying to convince them to get material, and depending on their own interests, they typically either refuse us, or there might be even legal implications that, for example, tissue was donated to them by the families for a very specific project and they can't share it. So to me, I think it's very important as a researcher that tissue, if it's donated, is donated to some sort of brain bank, I think, on one hand. The other hand is, I find it actually quite difficult to find registers. It's really, there is no unified brain bank register, not even for the US, not to mention globally in that sense. There's not a very good collaboration, in my experience, between donation center, and I think that's probably where an organization like a patient advocacy group or United Leukodystrophy Foundation could make a huge, huge difference. And really, if they take over to be in charge of those things and keep a register.
Thank you for bringing that point up. It's something that, we're developing, that we'd like to develop. And it's something in being here again in person after a couple years, I wasn't here last year, and where we're going with the research and what we're doing, that it probably needs to be under the ULF's umbrella to establish that and to bring it to where researchers will be able to say, oh, here's a link to a registry, or here are the links to the Brain and Tissue Bank, or here's what's available in the Brain and Tissue Bank, and then also to put families in touch. And it's just a way to keep everything kind of in a place where you have access to it. Any other questions?
I have 2.
Great. We're going to pass you the mic.
Since a lot of the patients are kind of spread around the world, how do you deal with, if a patient dies, like in Israel, how are you going to transport that back to? If a patient passes away in a different part of the world and they do manage to do the autopsy there, do you just get the samples transported back to the UPMC? And how do you go through with the legality of that? Because I know it takes a while to go through.
And I think it varies by country, and that's kind of why we have the model where we might be able to set this up in other countries, but it just depends on the country, right? So it depends on the logistics, and we haven't been worldwide yet. I mean, we are still working on this case from Mexico, and then but there's a couple glitches with that doesn't even have anything to do with the transport. Mom's kind of not wanting it to be gone yet. So, there's sensitivity issues we have to deal with, but that's a great question and something that we're growing into so that we want to expand. So I'll take it back to the team, and we need to further discuss how those logistics can be managed. And you said you had a second question?
Yeah. So since you guys are expanding to other leukodystrophies that might have manifestations in other organ systems, how are you going to approach pulling out those tissues? Is it going to be, you take out every affected organ system? Are you still focusing on the brain?
No, we'd like to expand to the other organs because there are other organs affected. We just haven't had any diseases where we've done the other organs. But we have protocols where we can, specifically, in some of the specific diseases, there's certain organs that are affected. We can start looking at that as well. So great question. You're welcome. Anything else? Anybody else? I really appreciate all of you coming. This is a sensitive topic. It's a really hard topic to discuss. It's one that I want to be there for the patients because I've gone through the process, and I can be there. And it's a family to family helping with the process. And I think that's where kind of the novel approach of this brain bank comes up with. And that way the family feels like we're really caring for, their child's tissues after they've passed. So, but if there's any other questions, or you can contact me, and yes, you have one more. So,
Is there a time period that if your child lives a long time past when you sign stuff, should you renew it or make contact every so many years? Because we went 20 years after we first signed it, and things were way out of date.
yeah.
But how often should we try to recontact?
That's a great question. I would think every 2 to 3 years we should take a look and renew the paperwork. I mean, I have a couple patients now that have done pre-paperwork, and we're getting kind of to that 2 to 3 year mark, and actually the child has gone from when he transitioned to being an adult, we updated the paperwork then. So yeah, it's important that we probably update that, but that would be my responsibility to reach out to you and say, hey, it's been a couple years. Are we here? Where we're at. Do you want to update this? Something you still want to consider? But even on the day that the patient passes away, you can say, no, I've decided I don't want to do this, and the paperwork goes away. So there's no commitment that you have to do this, even if you get paperwork in place prior.
Just a point of clarification there. If the child becomes an adult, can the parents still split it off?
So it depends on the state, and it depends on the legal guardianship and how all that happens with the legal guardianship in each state. So we just had a case that there were a lot of challenges. The parents had to go to court to make sure that they had some of that control, over certain things. But the child is cognitive enough, well, he's an adult now, that he was able to make his own wishes. So, but the parents needed to oversee it, so that when that time comes, the parents are actually the guardianship and can fulfill his wishes. So there are some complications to that, but we've worked through them. Good question.
What was the question?
No, he wants to. Okay.
The question was just if the child, or once the child becomes an adult, don't they have some of their own rights? And so can the parent still make those decisions, or is it enshrined in essentially the will?
Were there any questions online? I'm not sure how to check those. No? Okay, good. Anything else? We've got a few minutes left where you can have these few minutes to go refresh and get ready for the next session. It's up to you. So if you need a brochure or my business card, I have those here available. And contact me anytime. I'm on my phone's 24/7. So thank you.